Good evening, everyone. I am Councillor Laura Binks, Mayor of Strathbogie Shire Council, and I wish to welcome you to tonight's extraordinary council meeting held to discuss council's role in acknowledging January 26. We acknowledge the traditional custodians of the places we live, work and play. We recognise and respect the enduring relationship they have with their lands and waters, and we pay respects to elders past, present and emerging. Today we are meeting on the lands of the Taungurung peoples of the Eastern Kulin Nation, whose sovereignty here has never been ceded. It is with pleasure that we again welcome community members into the gallery. We are still socially distanced and following good hygiene practices as is required by current COVID guidelines. I also wish to welcome Councillor Dave Andrews and Director Kristen Favaloro, who are joining us online this evening, along with those watching the live stream meeting via our website. I wanted to take the opportunity to outline that voting at today's meeting will be held by a show of hands. If a councillor has a conflict of interest in the matter, they will be asked to leave the meeting, and no discussion on the matter will commence until we are sure that they have done so. Councillors will be contacted to rejoin the meeting after the matter has been considered and the vote concluded. We have a number of community members who have registered to speak to the item on the agenda this evening. I will call you forward when it is your turn to speak. Can you please come forward, sit in front of the microphone, and you'll need to turn it on with the big talking button. So you'll be facing us, and those online won't be able to see the front of you, they'll see the back of you. You have 5 minutes to make your submission. A bell will ring at the 4-minute mark so that you know to focus on those last few points you wish to make. Councillors can ask you questions of clarification but cannot enter into any debate. CEO Solomon, do we have any apologies for this evening?
Through you, Mayor, no, there are no apologies for this evening's meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillors, are there any disclosures of conflicts of interest to be made under Rule 94 of our Governance Rules and Division 2 of the Local Government Act 2020? No? Okay. So we will move to page 1 of the agenda this evening, item 5.2.1, Council's role in acknowledging January 26 deliberative and community engagement. Director Tingay, may we have a summary of this report, please?
Thank you, Mayor Binks. At the 19th of October 2021 Council meeting, Councillor Hayes-Burke sought a report from officers regarding Council's role in January 26 activities in recognition of First Nations people. This report was presented at the 17th of May Council meeting that recommended officers undertake broad consultation on 2 options with the community and relevant stakeholders, including the Shire's Australia Day committees and First Nation representatives. This recommendation was supported by Council, with the resolution authorising Council officers to engage with the community on 2 options, being option 1, that included a series of actions that no longer formally support celebrations on January 26, and option 2, continue to celebrate January 26 as per existing arrangements. The engagement period commenced on the 23rd of May and concluded on the 20th of June. A full in-depth engagement report is attached to this Council report. However, in a high-level summary, the following engagement reach and feedback was received. Through the Share Strathbogie portal, the poll received 845 votes from 492 IP addresses. Within the engagement report, officers have presented the data in the engagement report 3 ways to ensure multiple votes from a single IP address were clearly understood. When looking at the data from a single IP address, 46% of respondents voted for option 1 and 54% for option 2. 29 submissions were received via email and also the Share Strathbogie platform, where 12 were in support of option 1, 6 in support of option 2, and 11 provided alternative views. or further information. Australia Day committees, 4 provided a response either through a face-to-face meeting or through other means. Engagement with registered Aboriginal parties included that Tangerang Land and Water Council that they were in principle provided their support to Council's proposed change and in relation to Council's involvement, and that it was a decision for Council to make in regards to what Council chooses to do on the 26th of January. Feedback received via Share Strathbogie was varied, with no clear mandate for change nor a strong determination to retain existing arrangements. Feedback from some Australia Day committees, business chambers and the community sought for further time and consultation on the topic. Officers have provided a detailed table within this report that looked at a number of options for Council moving forward on this topic. Taking into account a whole range of considerations, officers propose and recommend option 5 for Council's consideration this evening. This option includes that Council continues existing arrangements for January 26 in 2023 and undertakes an independently recruited community panel process to participate in an independent facilitated deliberative engagement process to determine Council's role in January 26 for 2024 and beyond. There is a recommendation on page 2 of the agenda for Council's consideration. Thank you, Mayor Binks.
Thank you, Director Tingay. Councillors, we have a number of people who wish to speak to this item this evening. The first is Frank York. Frank, can you please come forward and we'll start the timer. Have you worked out your yep.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, councillors. I'm advocating the retention of the Strathbogie Shire's active participation and leadership and support of our official Australia Day activities on January 26th. How we treat January 26th has become contentious within the community. For the majority, it is the day when all Australians can come together to celebrate how fortunate we are to be Australian, regardless of one's origins or place of birth. More recently for some, the day has become politicised and characterised as Invasion Day or Survival Day, with calls that Australia Day should be moved to another date. Moving Australia Day will seemingly solve all of the issues that some see with January 26th. But first, if I may, some history. In 1770, 18 years before the First Fleet arrived, Lieutenant James Cook claimed Australia for Great Britain. Come 1788, 11 British ships were dispatched to Britain to establish a penal colony. And despite what's commonly thought, the First Fleet actually arrived in Australia roughly a week before January 26th. It is recorded that British convicts, Marines, officers and their families and children of convicts arrived ashore at Botany Bay on the 18th of January. On that day in 1788, these convict ships landed at what is now known as Port Jackson in New South Wales, where Governor Arthur Phillip raised the British flag to signal the beginning of the British colony. This fleet carried convicts, not invaders, as some would prefer to characterise. Since the early days of British colony, Sydney has marked January 26 under various names, including Australia Day, including Anniversary Day, First Landing Day and Foundation Day. This gradually evolved into Australia Day, and other states and territories officially adopted the name in 1935. Since 1979, the federal government has promoted an Australia Day that was less British and more Australian, with the objective being the unification of Australia's increasingly diverse population. Australia Day became what it is now in 1994, and according to the National Australia Day Council, it is a day to reflect on what it means to be Australian, to celebrate contemporary Australia and to acknowledge our history. Important quote. It's my belief it's Strathbogie Shire's responsibility to manage the Shire for the benefit of all residents and ratepayers. The councillors are responsible to the people and are not free to pursue individual or personal ideals or agendas. Withdrawal of council support, involvement and lead in Australia Day activities would be an act that crashes head-on to its creed of inclusiveness. Without council leading these activities, I ask the question, who will? Who will have the authority and the funding to create and manage Australia Day activities for the residents of the Shire? I have seen no evidence that any local Indigenous residents, of which according to the 2016 census there were 102, are so adversely impacted by Australia Day that the traditions of a federally gazetted day, Australia Day, should simply be erased from the diary of the services that the council leads. What I see is political divisiveness created by a minority group of people who claim to be offended because of the history of some 250 years ago. Because of this claim of offence, it is now pushed upon the rest of the Australian people to accept that because they're offended, we should simply change the date. Being offended is a personal choice. I would like to see us grow up as a country and be more responsible in that regard, responsible for our own feelings, responsible to act forgivingly towards the rest of the non-Indigenous Australia, considering we weren't actually responsible for what happened in 1788 and since. Council indeed needs to be bold, be Australian, be proud of our country and our history, mark Australia Day in a manner to which the Australia Day Council designed, a day when all Australians can come together to celebrate how fortunate we are to be Australian, regardless of one's origin or place of birth. Only through your involvement and leadership with Australia Day can the Strathbogie Shire lead discussion and shape how it looks in the future. Walking away from it now and pretending it is not a nationally gazetted day is not an option. To simply decree behind doors that the day will have no official support, or to insist that the day has a different focus, signalled by flags at half-mast and morning, pays no regard to what can be nor respects the diversity of the Shire. I commend that the Shire consider its role in representing all residents rather than chasing these personal ideals, and accordingly it retains its leading role in Australia Day in 2023 and beyond. Thank you.
Thank you for your submission. Councillors, are there any clarifying questions for Frank? Yes, Councillor Hayes-Burke.
I'd just like to know who is pushing their own agenda on council, in your opinion.
Thank you, Councillor. That's not directed at anyone. It's just a perception, I guess. That's all it is.
And I just want to ask, in your opinion, which history is the Australia Day Council acknowledging?
I don't know the answer to that question. Their statement is that the day was designed for all Australians to come together and if I can quote again, to read it, to make sure I'm precise, the day to reflect on what it means to be Australian, to celebrate contemporary Australia and to acknowledge our history is what the council stated as its intention.
Any other questions or clarification? Gosh, the microphones. Thank you, Frank. Our next speaker is Michelle Leach. Michelle, can you please come forward, and we'll start the clock when you start your presentation.
Mayor, councillors, Strathbogie Shire community. I sit before you as one of just many in our community who seek to end our council's support of Australia Day celebrations on the 26th of January. Given the leadership and reconciliation our Shire has shown, being the first Shire to implement a Memorandum of Understanding to recognise and govern relationships with the Taungurung people on whose land we are fortunate to call home, I was very disappointed to see the range of Australia Day activities and awards ceremonies throughout our Shire on 26th of January 2022. on the date that marks the claiming of this land as Britons and saw the start of violence, invasion, taking of land, lives and systemic racism against the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples who already lived here. While policies have changed over time, this systemic and cultural racism still exists today, demonstrated in just one way by continued celebration of Australia Day on the very date that causes pain for so many of our people. As Australians, we have much to celebrate about our wonderful nation and the devoted people who volunteer and work tirelessly to continue to make Australia and the Strathbogie Shire a better place. I would love for an Australia Day or other day for national celebration that is encompassing of Australians all, in the words of our national anthem. There has been much discussion of this important issue in our community of late. Some people believe this is not a Shire matter. I believe that just as our Shire has shown leadership with the MOU and with the recognition of climate change at a local level, by taking public action on an issue such as the celebration of Australia Day, our Shire can take an active role throughout the community and in signalling the importance of this issue to higher levels of government, potentially leading to meaningful changes around the actual date. Some members of our community feel that a majority of Australians want to celebrate this date. That change mustn't happen to suit a minority of people. 10 years ago, I heard calls to change the date and I didn't recognise it as an issue. While I haven't researched current statistics, I'm happy to describe the process of unlearning and relearning I personally have gone through to lead to my change of opinion. Like so many of my generation, my schooling taught very little about our Aboriginal history and basically outlined that the process of occupation was largely peaceful, with very little resistance from the nomadic Aboriginal people. In my mind, the term nomadic meant happy to move on to another place. The very basic history on the subject that I was taught left a picture of an uncultured, simplistic, singular group of people who benefited through British occupation, leading to modern ways. Through my work as an early childhood teacher, teaching at 2 early learning services within Euroa throughout this time, over the past few years, I've undertaken a gradual process of unlearning the untruths I was taught and absorbed through our culture, and relearning about the deep and rich cultures of First Nations peoples. I'm by no means an expert, anything close to an expert. I'm still very much learning. Those of us who work in early childhood education are fortunate. We're required through the Victorian Early Years Learning and Development Framework to provide inclusive programs. In the area of equity and diversity, early childhood professionals are required to promote cultural awareness in all children, including greater understanding of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander ways of knowing and being. There are many other points I won't have time to read, but you can go to the Victorian Early Years Learning and Development Framework to read more about what we're required to do in inclusive practices. Through embedding Aboriginal perspectives age appropriately throughout my play-based curriculum and helping our youngest generations develop inclusive beliefs, hopefully some of our team's work is filtering through to help families and the wider community want to learn more about the truth of our history and current reconciliation issues. While Strathbogie Shire and the other local government areas that have already withdrawn financial support of Australia Day celebrations on the 26th of Jan can't change the date, we can take steps to signal our support of First Nations peoples by not celebrating on this day. Moving Shire business such as recognition ceremonies to alternate dates can be done. I applaud that Strathbogie Shire for giving full consideration to this issue and raising difficult but vitally important discussions throughout our community.
Thank you, Michelle. Councillors, are there any questions of clarification for Michelle? No, thank you. Our next speaker is Andrew Walter. Andrew, can you please come forward? We'll start the clock when you start your presentation.
Thank you, Mayor. My name is Dr. Andrew Walter, PhD. I was born and raised at Violet Town. Part of my career to date has seen me travel, work and reside around the world in various capacities, with the most relevant being as coach of the Australian Biology Olympiad team, director of the International Biology Olympiad, the Olympic Games of Biology, and as a participant in the Rio Tinto Business with Communities program. I'm very pleased to have returned back as a resident of Violet Town, operating a family business that produces and trades in agricultural commodities and machinery around the world. I present myself as a person who takes great interest in facts and figures and takes pride in making decisions and undertaking actions which serve to help individuals and humanity as a whole. I would like to offer my views, which are based on first-hand experience and knowledge, with 4 categories of evidence. Firstly, I was the coach of the 1994 Young Australian of the Year, Anna Bound. Anna won the 1993 International Biology Olympiad and was the first competitor in the world to do so as a Western nation representative. Anna was recognised for her scholarly achievements rather than sporting as a tradition at the time. In my capacity as the coach of the Young Australian of the Year, I got to see many people from all backgrounds celebrating Australia Day. Secondly, I have had the experience of working and living with Aboriginal people in northwest and central New South Wales, and indeed to employing Aboriginal people directly as staff of the family business and as subcontractors. I have seen the many and varied benefits of seeing Aboriginal people given opportunities afforded by the dignity of a job and or commercial opportunity through the Rio Tinto Business with Communities program. The Rio Tinto program was about forming partnerships with Aboriginal groups to establish businesses and or cultural recognition activities that could directly employ Aboriginals for them to be able to enjoy the dignity of having a job, and in many cases leading to a successful business. The programs were about providing real benefits rather than just, in simple terms, a handout. Thirdly, in my capacity as Director of the International Biology Olympiad, I was employed directly under the Charter of the United Nations to manage the Olympic Games for biology. And whilst my role would suggest I was the global #1 biology educator, it was in fact a role all about international diplomatic relations. On a daily basis, I was required to be involved in various cultural, societal and political issues which dated back hundreds of years within and between nations. Have you ever tried to seek peace between a Greek and a Turk, a Kuwaiti and an Iraqian, or between a black Zimbabwean and a white Zimbabwean? The key lesson from this point is that you can't change the past. Those seeking forgiveness must have counterparties that are willing to forgive, and the best way forward for parties with a bad history is to move forward together and to focus on what you have rather than what you don't have. Fourthly, if the Council wants to send a positive message to our Indigenous community about reducing the support of celebrating Australia Day, how does this fit with the Council's effort to attract the Commonwealth Games rowing competition to Lake Ngambie? What greater example of colonisation by the British than the formation of the Commonwealth across so many nations, which is celebrated by the Commonwealth Games? Furthermore, rowing is a sport dominated by white Caucasians and often by the elite or privileged of white society. When I talk to my Aboriginal friends, they say they see that Lake Ngambie was built by wounding the Goulburn River Dreamtime serpent by the construction of the dam wall. Are you next going to propose to drain Lake Ngambie? Based on these 4 points, I would urge Strathbogie Shire Council to ramp up the celebration of Australia Day, to celebrate what makes Australia the very best country in the world, and especially our rich migrant and multicultural past and cultural diversity. Let's give all citizens every chance to think about the future in a positive manner and not be bogged down by their past. I can't help but look at my own experience working around the world to look at examples where wrongs have been forgiven and people have moved forward in a positive and respectful manner without dwelling on the past and wrongdoings with good or bad intent. Just look at the Third Reich, the Nazis, and the Jews in Germany today. They mutually recognise the past, but they work so effectively together at making Germany a better place, and indeed the world. In relation to recent events where an elected Australian political representative has refused to stand in front of an Australian flag, a prominent Australian Aboriginal leader, Warren Mundine, said, "The Aboriginal flag is for Aboriginal people, the Torres Strait Islander flag is for Torres Strait Islander people. The Australian flag is for all Australian people. Aboriginals regard themselves as Australians, and it was idiotic for this parliamentary representative to stand in front of the Australian flag, end quote. Warren Dean went on to say that the people and organisations behind this are, quote, just a bunch of university types trying to divide the nation. In conclusion, I would be very upset if anyone regarded myself in any way as being Aboriginal. Quite the opposite. I actually hold our Australian Indigenous people with great admiration for their ability to live in our climate without electricity, refrigeration, ferrous steel, mobile phones, and other things to do with modern life.
Thank you, Andrew. You've reached your time.
Yep.
Councillors, are there any questions of clarification for Andrew? No? Thank you. You can take your seat. Our next speaker is Jim Billings from Avenel Australia Day Committee. Jim, can you please come forward and commence your presentation?
Good evening. My hearing gets worse every day and I'm missing some of the words of wisdom that have been said. I'm sorry about that, and I hope I don't sort of say something that's already been said too much. I've been asked by the Avenel Australia Day Committee to come here and talk to you. They are they're concerned about process, and they want me to talk to you about process. Before I do that, I just wanted to say, as you know, I'm sure, Avenel is a very close-knit community. It's a wonderful community. It's a joy for me to belong to the Avenel community. The level of care they demonstrate for one another is evidenced by the Avenel Active Group, which has, when they meet, they have between 20 and 30 members come along each month, and all of those people are there because they care for other members in the community. So it's a very strong community, and one we value greatly, and one we want to protect. Avenel Active, by the way, is not in any way wanting to direct the way people should think and have a view. They are wanting to support people in expressing views, and they want to support people in coming together and discuss. And that leads me to the process that the Australia Day Committee are concerned about. They're concerned that they have time for people to come together and carefully think about the issues and listen to one another, talk to one another in a respectful way. If there's pressure to come back to Shire too quickly, it creates stress, they believe, and it doesn't help the process. This is an opportunity. Right now, we have a great opportunity to learn a lot. We have a great opportunity to learn about the whole history of the arrival and the impact. It's a great opportunity to learn, and we should grasp that opportunity and make it as workable as we possibly can and as fruitful as we possibly can. So the process is critical. Now, what the Australia Day Committee are proposing is this. They've asked if they can have until the 1st of September to ask each community group, for the tennis club, the bowls club, all the different community groups, to come together and have a discussion about the proposals. What they're proposing after that is to have a community meeting with a facilitator and try and reach a consensus, try and sort of agree on a way forward so that they can present it to council. But as I say, I think the real value of it is it's an opportunity for great learning, and if the process is if there's enough space and time in the process, and there's respectful interaction between people from all sorts of different points of view, then I believe we can gain greatly from this.
Thank you, Jim. Councillors, are there any questions or clarification for Jim? No? Okay, thank you, Jim. You can take your seat. We next have Sandy McKenzie wishing to address the meeting.
Good evening, Mayor Binks and councillors. Thank you for the opportunity. As a citizen of Avenel, my interest in presenting to this council meeting arises from a number of factors. When I was a member of the House of Representatives years ago, I was asked to be the parliamentary representative for the Australian Council of Local Government Organisations. I didn't actually volunteer for it, I was leg roped, which now has a membership of some 500 members, local government council members. My family forebears came to Van Diemen's Land, Tasmania, in the 1830s, when the appalling Black Wars had only just demonstrably failed. The wars that were in the British colonial attempt to incarcerate the Tasmanian Aboriginals. My forebears soon left and moved to Port Phillip, which was then part of the New South Wales Crown Colony. I have been a recipient of a Strathbogie Shire Australia Day Citizen of the Year Award. I'm not presenting on behalf of the Avenel Active Group Incorporated. I am a member of that group, but Jim has already done that on that behalf. My fundamental case is that Australia Day is and should be a national day of celebration for all citizens in the so-called lucky country. This is the case with almost all of the 90 other countries that celebrate a national day. In the vast majority of those countries, the National Day celebrates their independence or when they have become a republic. The Australia Day Council, under its Act, is titled the National Australia Day Council. As a consequence, I am not entirely enthused by the idea of a concept or practice of local government councils determining when and under what conditions Australia's National Day will be celebrated, either council-wide or, in my view, even more bizarrely, by each township or village in the area. Again, as I've said, there are more than 500 local government councils in this country. There is a quite reasonable, and to my mind, a quite compelling alternative to commemorate our National Day. At present, we commemorate the day that the First Fleet landed and Captain Arthur Phillip planted the Union Jack on the shores of Port Jackson to claim New South Wales as a British colony. It was hardly a celebratory commencement. Near starvation, drunkenness, rum rebellion, remember? And rape and pillage, corruption up the highest levels, and conflict and much worse with the local inhabitants. And the transportation of 165,000 convicts went on for another 60 years. That was the start. The same date of the 26th of January was also the day the Australian Nationality and Citizenship Act came into effect in 1949. From that day, every Australian-born person, including Aboriginals and Torres Strait Islanders, automatically became Australian citizens and no longer had to hold, for example, a British passport. There have been many amendments and subsequent changes to those conditions, but Australia Day in 1949 was, in my view, a far more significant event than the 26th of January 1788. And to make this change, perhaps by plebiscite, as we've done for the national anthem and more recently same-sex marriage, this change is immensely convenient because it's not changing dates, holidays or our current Australia Day activities and funding arrangements. In this regard, I would suggest that the advocacy to state and federal governments clause be retained in option 5, which provides a mechanism for the Shire to progress further if the community consultation process so recommends. There will be objections, no doubt, but those who want to change the date, but with common sense, tolerance and growing need for coming together as Australians, we just need to change the purpose of Australia Day and not to embark on a debatable and divisive process. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandy. Councillors, are there any questions of clarification for Sandy? No? Thank you. You can take your seat, Sandy. Our next speaker is Josh Mellor. Josh, can you please come forward?
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, councillors, for allowing me to speak today. I feel very privileged and accepted. I was born and grew up in outback New South Wales. I'm very familiar with rural communities and the tough times that we face, with hardships often lasting years and years. I'm also very familiar with the lack of inclusion felt by minorities. I'm practically an expert myself. I'm also a Euroan. I currently don't celebrate Australia Day. To me, it's a bad celebration. It gives me goosebumps. A celebration that lacks inclusion and continues to isolate and ignore our First Nations people. I would, however, celebrate a day that is modified and inclusive of everyone, a more culturally diverse and fulfilling celebration. I support the motion for deliberate engagement process. Our council has a great opportunity to build awareness. This process is the start of something great, something big, a recognition of human rights, empowering everyone to learn, contribute, heal, and to celebrate our country in another way, a better way. The Strathbogie Council has an obligation to the Tuggeranong people. We also should have an obligation to everybody and preceding generations. This motion is not about taking a celebration away. It's about opening another space for all people, adding more value to celebrations across the land, opening a space that is more fulfilling so that one day everybody in Strathbogie will be happy to celebrate, inclusive of First Nations people. I'm also interested and sensitive to people who are opposed to this move. People may think this is a soft issue or a waste of resources. Some people do find it hard to talk about, acknowledge, or understand this issue. It is important that we're also sensitive to people who have been removed, have not experienced, or know little about this issue, perhaps to no fault of their own, as they may also be trying to heal themselves in some way or another. We cannot move forward as a community without asking questions. We need to remain curious and inclusive. The community will not have essence or a collaborative future without understanding the gaps in our values. And in time, we will become more aligned as we grow and heal. We need consultation with the community to better understand and collectively move forward with celebrations. This is not removing celebrations, but opening a space for everyone, adding more value to our annual calendar. Community engagement for this motion is not a waste of money and should not be compared with expenditure on waste, sewerage, or the like. We are talking about a celebration that deeply hurts people. This should be taken seriously. This is community. A community drives inclusion. Inclusion isn't just a right, inclusion is a living. I'm so excited about the future of Strathbogie. I look forward to a Strathbogie that showcases diversity, art, culture and respectful values. I'm excited about a day that is inclusive so that our next generation can celebrate together. I'm excited about country that embraces change. I encourage councillors to accept this motion. I dream of a new day that is celebrated by all, with good conscience and good intentions. A Strathbogie Day that conjures fabulous celebrations, embraces culture and includes everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Josh. Councillors, are there any clarifying questions of Josh? No? Are there any clarifying questions of our officer? No? Oh, yes. Thank you. Director Tingay, I just wanted to clarify what does Strathbogie Shire Council currently do? What is our current participation on January 26th? What is our current role, I guess, is the clarification I'm seeking.
Thank you, Mayor Binks. So on page 5 of the council report that's presented tonight, there is an option 2, which is what the options 1 and 2 we went out to the community with, but within that table it details what council's existing arrangements are for the 26th of January. So that includes applying and coordinating and acquitting funds from the National Australia Day Council, overseeing all Australia Day activities, and obviously we support our individual townships and their Australia Day committees to be able to do a number of these elements. Promotion and marketing of the events that are taking place. We do some work in the background. Event permits are required to be made, and as part of that we support our Australia Day committees in undertaking risk assessments. We also support the coordination of the Australia Day Awards and also the Shire-wide awards as well. The coordination of individual councillor speeches and attendance at the relevant Australia Day committees. Of previous years, we've also provided a number of COVID-safe measures for the Australia Day events to ensure that they can be carried out in line with current restrictions and guidelines at that point in time. Managing the Australia Day ambassadors and obviously anything else that really needs to be done behind the scene to be able to support the committees in delivering their events for that day.
Thank you. Councillors, are there any further questions or clarification? Councillor Haysbert.
Director Tingay, do you believe that in this motion where it states the deliberative process as a form of engagement will be undertaken by the community, do you believe that that will allow for some education for the community?
Thank you, Councillor Haysbert. So within a deliberative engagement process, there's pieces of information that are certainly provided to the panel that to enable the panel to make an informed decision and an informed opinion in regards to a particular topic. So yes, there's certainly relevant information, education, facts, statistics, a whole range of information that's provided to members of the panel to ensure that they can derive to a decision.
Thank you. Councillor Hourigan had a question as well. So question clarification, Councillor Hourigan.
Thank you. Manager Tingay, it talks about a panel. So our community obviously has just in excess of 10,000 people. How many people are we looking to recruit for that panel, or what percentage of our community? And if that hasn't been decided yet, that's okay too.
I also need to refer the engagement questions to Manager Favaloro, who's online, but they may not have been determined yet. I'm not sure. So I'm not sure. Yeah, she comes.
I'm there, sorry. So to do the recruitment for this, we would use an independent person, and we would ask them to, I suppose, create that representative sample and what, and they would determine the numbers and where they were from and all those sorts of things. So we would seek an independent expert to provide that for us.
Rayburn.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you, Mayor. Director Tingay, with all that information you gave out before, which the Mayor asked about what our job is, if we decide to not work and do this stuff, who takes all that jobs on? Is it the community, or is it what goes on, please, so the community understands what happens?
Thank you, Councillor Rayburn. So I guess there's a couple of options with that, and they're also detailed within the report as we looked through the process of a number of considerations. But essentially, the local township Australia Day committees would be eligible to apply for funding through the National Australia Day Council for funding to be able to support the operation of the event. Should Council choose not to hold Shire-wide awards on Australia Day, but maybe have a similar Strathbogie Volunteer Award during Volunteer Week, individual Australia Day committees could determine their own application process, and that would be something that Council would not be involved in. In addition, we have a statutory requirement under the local law to facilitate event permits, so that is something that Council would be required to do. The organisation of the individual events in the township, should the Australia Day committees wish to pursue, would be solely on the responsibility of individual townships to be able to pull that event together. We currently do also have a legislative requirement as a council to deliver citizenship ceremony, if required, on the 26th of January, and that is currently, as I said, a legislative requirement. We would also then not obviously provide any administration support to individual committees should they choose to undertake celebrations on Australia Day, speeches, etc., ambassadors, etc. They would all need to be done directly through the Australia Day Council.
To follow up on that, so we just, I don't know how to ask this question without being political. So we would just walk away from those committees and allow them to defend for themselves without any pre-training or that? I'm just trying to feel just comfortable where they get, so people understand what is required of it. Thank you,
Councillor Rayburn. So there are committees are fairly au fait with the current process. There's committees have been around for a long time and also have both new and old representation on the individual committees, so they certainly are well aware of the requirements of their role. Each individual township does it a little bit differently in terms of the celebration that they like to have if they choose to celebrate, and what inclusions go in the program for that day. That is determined by the individual committees. We are definitely in the background supporting as per current existing arrangements, but they are certainly committees are certainly well and truly aware of responsibilities and obligations to be able to provide a celebration if they choose so within their individual township.
Councillor Hayes-Burke.
Sorry, Director Tinghay, just one more. So in council, if council does choose to withdraw from contributing to the celebrations, that's not to say that council doesn't want to celebrate the community, is it?
So just to clarify.
Celebrate the good work that the community does through the community awards program. It's not saying that we wouldn't continue a community awards program.
Certainly, if that's what council would like to consider as part of option one that was consulted on, there certainly was an option in there around holding volunteer-like awards during Volunteer Week to acknowledge the amazing contribution that a number of community members provide to the Strathbogie community. I think that it's important to note that this report and also the previous report and deliberations for options for engagement were really about council's role, not the community's essentially role, but the council's role in terms of what the council might choose to do moving forward in regard to support or not.
Okay, are there any further questions of clarification from directors? From councillors for directors? Yes, Councillor Murray.
Can I ask one further question? About point 3 under the recommendation that you made, that there's a deliberative engagement process. That process, in the officer's view, is about what is the aim of that process in the officer's view?
Yeah, I'll defer to our Executive Manager, Favaloro, who's on the screen, who will just pop up in a second to answer that question.
Thank you, Councillor Murray. So I think what we've seen out of the engagement report that was presented with tonight's council report is that there's not necessarily a clear mandate on what the community has said. So what deliberative engagement does is it gets a group of people, a representative sample, into a room, and it gives them a really clear remit or a really clear question for them to investigate. They get lots of information, they get to weigh up options, they get to deliberate, they get to think really deeply about it, and then provide their recommendation. So I would say the difference is clear remit, lots of information, lots of time to process it, and the outcome will be a clear recommendation.
Sorry, just a follow-up to that. Is it a recommendation about council's involvement in the Australia Day process, or is it going to be a recommendation about the community's engagement in the day?
It will 100% be about council's role, because that's what we're engaging about, and that's the question that we're asking, and that's the decision that we are making.
Thank you, Executive Manager Favaloro. Are there any further questions or clarification? No? Okay, councillors, can I have a motion, please, and can you state what your motion is? Councillor Rayburn.
I'd like to recommend that on page 2, the recommendation that Council, number 1, note the community feedback as outlined by the Community Engagement Report, and 2, continue to celebrate January 26 in 2023 as pre-existing arrangements. 3, 4 and 5 be deleted.
Thank you, Councillor Rayburn. Do I have a seconder for the motion? Are you seconding, Dave? Yes? Okay. Yes. Sorry, you've got a thumb over your camera or something. Thank you. Okay, so Councillor Rayburn, would you like to speak to your motion?
Thank you, Mayor. Can I just say this has taken a lot of soul searching, hard work, talking to community, understanding what Australia Day does represent, listening to everyone here speak tonight from the heart. A lot of it was from the heart, exactly what's going on. I'd like to give people more an opportunity to be able to think about Australia Day, but we as a council have to make a decision. I as a councillor can't spend any more money on trying to find out what other people think. We are elected as councillors to make a decision for what we believe is the best for this Shire at the moment. I truly believe, and this is what I believe at the moment, is things will change federally, and that's where I believe it should come from, not from the lower echelon of government. This should be a decision made from the top echelon of government. So that's the reason why I've gone with this tonight. I know that some people will think that I've made the wrong decision, and some people say I've made the right decision. But I've spoken, and when I've sat here and try and work out which way is the best way, I've been told that if you're an advocate, you will lead your community and work with your community and believe what your community is telling you. If you want to be a true leader, you go out and be a stirrer. Well, tonight I can't be a stirrer. I have to listen to the whole community. And with all the information I've received, 60-40 still wants to keep it as it is. So that's the way I go, and that's where I've come from. Thank you.
Councillor Andrews, would you like to speak to the motion or reserve your right?
I'd like to speak, thank you, Mayor. And I do support what Councillor Rayburn has said. It's not an easy issue, but to put it simply, it is a national day, and I think the council's decision should be driven by the federal government of the country. And as Councillor Rayburn said, that things are going to change dramatically with the change of government. And I also put forward to leave the day as it is for the foreseeable future. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Andrews. Does any councillor wish to speak against the motion? Councillor Hayes-Burke.
This has been really tricky for everyone, so I appreciate everyone coming out tonight, and I appreciate everyone's feedback on the Share Strathbogie portal. I mean, it shows it's working really well, because we did have over 500 genuine individuals make submissions or written submissions, and thanks to the speakers tonight. Also want to say thanks to former Councillor Kate Stuthers, because she started this tricky conversation in this chamber, and I know that it was tough for her too, but I think even bringing these things to light means progress. Sorry, it's pretty emotional for me. I guess I'm saddened that my fellow councillors don't want to embark on this journey to have the truth told, because I think it's important for this council, it's important for this nation, and yeah, it's important at all levels of government. I was going to read from my script, but I kind of got off guard by Councillor Rayburn's proposal. I would like to support the deliberative process, which is in the council recommendation, because I think that this is a long conversation. It's been happening for 230 years, and I didn't want the conversation to stop here with a council decision tonight. I wanted the community to have a chance to learn the history of First Nations people, and to really understand that, you know, this is a shared history that we can all embrace. And First Nations people they're not asking us to stop celebrating something, they're just asking to be included. And I got a really great statement from the CEO of Tuggerang Land and Water Council, Matt Burns. He's also a member of the First Peoples Assembly, and it really made it clear to me that the 26th of Jan, it's just a sore point for Aboriginal people, because it celebrates the suppression of Tuggerang language and culture, the incarceration and the genocide of our people, and it's the annual reminder of the dispossession of our people and the ensuing systemic and institutional racism which continues to this day. So, yeah, this is a much bigger conversation than the 26th of Jan, and I was hoping tonight that my fellow councillors would allow the community to be a part of that conversation, to join the federal government as it embarks on achieving the Uluru Statement, to join the Victorian government as it walks with Aboriginal people, as it embarks on this negotiation of treaty with the First Nations Assembly. So I guess I'm sort of saddened that we can't, but it's all progress, just having these conversations. So thanks to the community for being a part of it. And I feel like the community's asking us to lead tonight. I think the community, even though the report wasn't hugely in favour of changing the date, I believe that it did show a mandate for change, because it showed that the community was prepared to have these conversations, and I thank them for that. I know it's tricky. I really feel like Strathbogie Shire could lead the way with this, and I guess, yeah, maybe we'll bring this conversation up again soon. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hayes-Burke. Would any councillor like to speak in favour of the motion? Councillor Dickinson.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm not at odds with some of the opinions and good intentions expressed by my colleagues and members of the public. However, I wonder if we fully realise the divisiveness, implications, complications and the difficult way forward for such a complex issue. I have both empathy and sympathy for First Nations people and do have some background, having worked with Aboriginal people in the Northern Territory, 1 year in Darwin and 2 on an Aboriginal mission. I'm not going to pretend I have the answers, however, I urge all councillors to exercise caution when making their decision on how to vote and how this challenge can be resolved to the satisfaction of everyone involved. Strathbogie Shire recognises and supports strengthening relationships between Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples and non-Indigenous peoples for the benefit of all Australians. We participate and promote celebrating NAIDOC Week as it recognises the history, culture and achievements of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. The National Reconciliation Week follows National Sorry Day, which recognises the stolen generations. We also have a Memorandum of Understanding with the Tongarong Land and Waters Council. We can't change our history, however we can recognise it and incorporate it into our Australia Day celebrations by making it more inclusive and commemorative, thus building together a better future. The National Australia Day Council are working towards reflecting, respecting and celebrating the people whose ancestors walked on country for tens of thousands of years to the newest Australian citizens. By dispensing with Australia Day, this council could be seen as ignoring history. 5 points have been made. I won't deal with the first 2 because they are the 2 that are being voted on. But I can't support, on point 3, I cannot support the additional expenditure of $25,000 to employ an independent consultant, and so it follows that I cannot support points 4 and 5. So what are the alternatives? Leave it to both the federal and state governments to resolve with all Australian people. Australia Day is a national public holiday. Australian citizenship is also the responsibility of the federal government. Do we want to join the likes of Yarra and Darebin councils who have elected to dispense with Australia Day celebrations? They were then stripped of their right to hold citizenship ceremonies by the government of the day, led by Malcolm Turnbull. We have a new federal government which has recommitted the Australian Labor Party to the Uluru Statement from the Heart, which outlines a way forward for recognising First Nations in Australia. The Victorian State Government is also working towards a treaty through the First Peoples Assembly of Victoria as the democratic voice for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples in the treaty process, which includes the Tongarong Nation. Good things are happening, and that's the point. This is not Strathbogie Day, Euroa, Avenel, Longwood or Nagambie Day. It is Australia Day, and as such should be led by these higher tiers of government. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dickinson. Would anyone like to speak against the motion? Councillor Murray.
Yeah, I feel like I've been a bit. I had all these notes written about another option, and I feel like I've been sort of railroaded into this, talking about this thing by one of my fellow councillors. I didn't see this coming. Sorry. I too am a bit emotional about it because I think this really is a very bad move. Really, you know, the there is an opportunity here for council to support a community conversation and a development of a story here. It's not really about Australia Day, as Councillor Dickinson would have you believe. It's really about continuing the process of developing a story and a conversation about what we might do on that day. What does that day look like? What ought it look like for our community who wants to be diverse and inclusive, to show some empathy towards others? What should we be doing on Australia Day to support each other as a community on that day? It's not about whether the day happens or not. The day will happen. Australia Day can happen. We've got it here, in many recommendations that Australia Day could happen. It's more to me about what we do and the story about what happens on that day. All right, and how we include people and how we develop that story to be inclusive. So the motion that has been put by Councillor Rayburn does not enable us to continue that story. It actually cuts the story off. It says we're going to do exactly what we did in the past and we're going to do it all the way in the future. Now, our job as a council here is to make decisions for the community and their future. And we've had people, submitters, talking about that. We need to think about the future, not bury our head in the sand and say everything's going to stay the same, all right, from now on, but support good decision making for our children and our children's children and so on, all right, in the future. And I think there are other ways of doing that which are being ignored here. All right, by developing that story and being inclusive and getting the community engaged in a process that enables us to be responsive and take us on that journey together. So I implore councillors to vote against this motion. I think it's retrograde. It puts our head in the sand. It does not meet our obligations to the community nor our community's future. We need to face this issue, we need to talk about it, and we need to develop an understanding about it together. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Murray. Would anyone else, would any other councillor like to speak against the motion? Councillor Horrigan.
Thank you.
For the motion, for or against?
I'll just speak to the motion.
Speak to the motion.
Okay. And then you'll find out in a minute. Paul, can you please turn off your microphone for me?
Oh.
Thank you. Councillor Rayburn, you really did, get us all tonight off guard. I'd like to thank Councillor Hayes-Burke for bringing up the topic so that it can be discussed. I'd like to thank the community for coming in and speaking. It's very brave of you because it brings strong emotions either way, as we've seen from all our councillors tonight. The original recommendation was requesting that we go out to the community for engagement and to discuss that level. And so this report that's been brought to us tonight showed the different ways that we've engaged with our community. So we spent, unfortunately, only 1 month doing that. And in regards to the feedback that we received, if we go off the original feedback, 8% of our community responded, but if we go off IP addresses as what's in the report, we received 5%. And that was open to the whole community to be able to submit their options and different feedback, and it was shared a lot, but it was very much social media driven, and so therefore was the engagement suitable for what we were looking at doing. Unfortunately, in that there wasn't any education, there wasn't any learning, there wasn't any way that anyone could have a discussion. And whilst you could submit a third option, and your third option could be someone else's or your third option could be your own, it wasn't put into a specific category. And then we look at this current recommendation, and I agree with the community in that we need more time to think, we need more time to discuss, and we need more time to consult. I also agree with what I've heard tonight is that there does need to be some more education around it. And I don't wish to express an opinion either way on my topic of whether we change Australia the date, etc., etc. I don't have one. I don't have an opinion at this stage. I'm not well educated enough in the topic to be able to come out and say this is how I feel. And we're not discussing about changing a date. We're discussing about the way council's involvement is in it. However, I'm not confident with the recommendation for point 3, 4 or 5 and how that is going to help council in doing all of that. I would have liked to have seen a different recommendation. I could have perhaps came up with one, but I don't have the answer for it. And so I note the community feedback that's outlined, and I note that we continue to celebrate January 26 in 2023. But the good thing about the recommendation, it doesn't talk about how we celebrate it in 2024 or 2025 or 2026. And so for me, that opens up the time for learning, for education, for our community to think about it in that response. And I suppose mainly my concern is about deliberative engagement and what does that look like and how many people does that include, and is that people that are being able, who are putting their hands up and saying we want to be part of that, or is it randomly selected, or how does that look? So in saying all of that, I'm very much confident that we have movement on the issue as a younger generation come through, and they have a very, well, according to statistics that's been conducted, I think federally, if I read right, that there will be more talk on it. But for myself, at a local government level, I don't feel that that I can go with deliberative engagement or points 3, 4 and 5. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Hourigan. Councillor Rayburn, would you like to exercise your right of reply?
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate all the councillors' comments. I really do. Councillor Dickinson, your words were, to me, unbelievable. To Councillor Murray, I understand your frustration, but what we've done is started a conversation. Just because council's now made a decision tonight does not stop that conversation. It just stops the divisiveness and what's going on out into the community about what is being said about Australia Day. It's now up to the community to come back to us with their response. And I leave that in the community's hands, because 2023 is, as Councillor Hourigan said, is the date that's in this motion. It doesn't, as it says, it doesn't say 2024 or 25. So I say that. And to Councillor Haysbert, thank you for bringing this up. I really do. And I understand your emotion. I get very emotional on issues which I believe truly in myself. And as you know, I sometimes do thump desks when I get excited. But tonight, I just think it just needed to be finalised, finished, and allow the conversation to be put out into the community themselves, and council step back and allow community to work through on what they want to do. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rayburn. Councillors, I'll put the motion to a vote. Can I see a show of hands for all those in favour, please? And against? Certainly, Paul. So can I see, sorry, for those in favour? Councillor Rayburn, Councillor Dickinson, Councillor Hourigan, Councillor Andrews, and against, Councillor Haysbert, Councillor Murray, Councillor Binks. Thank you. So I declare that the motion is carried. CEO Solomon, is there any confidential business to consider this evening?
Through you, Mayor, no, there is no confidential business for tonight's meeting.
Thank you. Councillors, the next meeting of Council is ordinary Council meeting scheduled to be held on Tuesday the 19th of July at the Euro Community Conference Centre commencing at 6 p.m. There being no further business, I declare that the meeting has closed at 7:15 p.m.